Akeem Olufemi Gbajabiamila. God bless you all.
Welcome to this week's edition of House Ticket, the program that highlights legislative business in the Green Chamber of the National Assembly. I am Bintu Magaji, your guide on the program. On this episode, we shall continue with our review series where we have been focusing on bills introduced by the House to amend obsolete laws of the nation in the various sectors of the economy. This week's package focuses on education sector as well as a review of the Electoral Act. Aside that, some special committees of the House during the annual break by lawmakers continued with work. A recent oversight function by the House Committee on Public Accounts discussed foreign missions expenditures and travels, as well as government agencies' welfare packages, all in a bid to ensure accountability of public funds. Let's meet again after this short break for the full program. Stay with us.
We set our minds right, embrace each other in love and brotherhood. We will come through these troubling times. We will survive, we will recover, and then we will thrive. One nation under God, free, peaceful, and prosperous.
Thanks for staying tuned. We'll begin reports on the program with the oversight function by the House Standing Committee on Public Accounts, where the lawmakers visited the Auditor General of the Federation at the Audit House. Government expenditure by agencies, including the Auditor General's office itself, was questioned as members queried misappropriation and overspending of public funds. The details as compiled and presented from the studios.
The Public Accounts Committee was at the Audit House Wednesday, the 28th of September 2021, during which lawmakers perused the financial report of the Office of the Auditor General. In the course of analyzing budgetary performance of the office from 2019 to 2021, lawmakers identified loopholes and anomalies in spendings by the office, describing some of it as reckless. Items such as welfare package of the staff was queried, as there was an increase from about 12 million naira to 77 million naira between the budgets of the year 2019 to 2020.
You said welfare packages. 2019 you said 12 million. And I begin to wonder how in 2020 the welfare package jumped to 77 million. About 77 million something. So what is accounting for that, variation, that difference? I believe the difference is so much because that is the difference of almost, is it 50 something or 60 something million? Which is on the higher side. So I would want to have evidence. And then, of course, who are those welfare packages meant for?
There was yet another query by the committee on the expenditure of 1.9 million naira spent on a new clinic infrastructure, 3.96 million naira on drugs and medical supplies, as well as 7.72 million naira on medical consulting. Other queries raised included local training, where the sum of 40.71 million naira and 72.56 million naira on insurance premium for 2020 were expended.
They say local training where? Because we need document to support that so that we can be able to understand, because I can see it's 100% expenditure is done. Auditor General Annual Conference. Was it done here in Abuja or where is it done? 20 million, because there is not anything to back it up and it's done 100%.
A larger part of the year where the nation was on lockdown. Does it mean that the office of the Auditor General did not observe the lockdown? They were still going ahead with activities during the period of the lockdown? Because they spent higher in 2020.
Audit of foreign missions, consular offices, and 20 defense attaches. 20. And no single payment voucher to prove that somebody attended before this constitutional committee, Mr. Chairman. This is not acceptable.
On personnel costs, an increase of 1.98 billion naira from 2019 to 1.99 billion naira in 2020 was questioned despite the depleting workforce and a request for 500 new staff.
They made us to understand that the staff have decreased and there are vacancies of 500. But despite that, in 2020, the appropriation went up. Is it because they have made new employment?
The Auditor General did not provide definite answers to the questions raised, but reacted to the question of audit of the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation and that of foreign missions of the country.
Is it because this is the Auditor General's office that they will just give to us any document that is being prepared for them, for us to see or peruse without any evidence of how all the money or the budget given to them be expended? That is one. The second one is that this is the office of the Auditor General's office. You audit all the ministries, the agencies, everything you audit. Who audits this office? Which office is saddled with the responsibility of checkmating? Yes, and that's it. Yes, that's no. This is the first time we are coming here. We are not auditing. This is not. We are not auditing any of their spendings or their expenditures. What I'm saying, we are just oversighting. What I'm saying is that who calls to order the recklessness of the financial spendings of this office? That's my question.
The words being used for this office by one of your members, recklessness of the Office of the Auditor General for the Federation. I plead that that word does not apply to this office. Please, sir, let me... No. Unless, see, see, sir, let me last.
Auditor General, Auditor General, no. Please. Mr. Chairman, no. Mr. Chairman is over, please.
There is no law that has provided for this office to be audited, and we objected to the audit. This is oversight. If it is oversight, there is no way I would have adequately prepared for the questions you come here to ask. So if it is evidence you want, constitute an audit. We make our records available for audit. It is not for me as an Auditor General to come here with all the evidence.
Mr. Chairman, sir.
Assuming there is a law that is passed and assented to by National Assembly that says who audits the Office of the Auditor General, I'm not sure most of these issues that are being raised now will be raised.
Based on all inadequacies and inavailable enough documentations that my colleagues had asked from Auditor General's office, move that Auditor General office avail us immediately all the necessary documentation to back up his presentation before this committee. I so move, Mr. Chairman.
Aside looking through their financials, he has told all of us the problems his office is facing, ranging from shortage of personnel to inadequate funding, even all the performance audit that we're all talking about. You also need money to do them. So these are all the issues that we will pay attention to legislatively, through legislative advocacy, and more importantly, if we're able to see through the audit bill, that will guarantee the independence of his office.
The Office of the Auditor General is expected to comply within 7 days.
Those against say nay. Let's have it.
The committee inspected the forensic unit before departing the audit house.
Many thanks for still being there. If you just joined us on the program, it's House Ticket, and we brought you details of the oversight by the Public Accounts Committee over audited reports from the Auditor General's books on public funds expenditures. Away from that, we will take a recent outing of Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila during the recess, where he was a guest speaker at the 5th World Conference of Speakers of Parliament in Vienna, Austria. In his presentation titled Countering Misinformation and Hate Speech on and Offline Requires Stronger Regulations, the Speaker reiterated the need for parliaments all over the world to strive for balance in tackling hate speech and misinformation so as to protect the right to free speech, life and dignity of citizens. And in doing so, Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila had called for the recognition of the dangers of hate speech and misinformation in the country, calling for the use of proper and legal means considering morality and constitutional responsibility to achieve the balance. He also advocated for punishment for those who abuse the right of freedom of expression by holding them accountable for their actions, especially when the abuse leads to evident bad outcomes. The Speaker enjoyed the support of other Speakers of Parliament on regulating the space for hate speech and misinformation, while emphasizing the need to protect freedom of expression. Away from the Speaker's events to other legislative matters, you recall we've been on a special series on review of obsolete laws by the 9th House through repeal and amendments of bills. As earlier mentioned, this week's package focuses on the Electoral Act amendment and education sector review. Let us see the work by the House on these two important components of our country. Keep watching.
The revised legislative agenda of the 9th House focuses on 10 priority areas, among them constitutional amendment, which includes reviewing electoral laws of the country. Access to education for all Nigerians is also among 10 top priority areas. It is in this regard that the House Committee on Electoral Matters, saddled with the responsibility of overseeing amendment to the Electoral Act, went to work after an amendment bill came into the 9th House on electoral reform titled Bill for an Act to Repeal the Electoral Act No. 6 as amended and enact the Independent National Electoral Commission Bill 2020 to regulate the federal, states and area councils elections and for related matters.
We need to consolidate on the gains of our democratic achievements and to also address the lacuna identified in the electoral legal framework. A typical example is the case of the Kogi State governorship election in 2015, where a leading candidate died after the commencement of polls, but before the declaration of results.
During the consideration of the bill and towards ensuring its provision are in tandem with modern-day reality, various concerns were raised, including the over 48-hour timeline given to political parties to replace a candidate in the event of a sudden death during the election process. The role money plays in electioneering, as well as the use of electoral devices, among other issues, came up.
The money stipulated there, it's not about the individual, but a system to say this is when you are running for governorship or president or has a representative, this is what you are expected to do. We have seen what happened during the last election, 2015. Was a typical example. Buhari, by his own declaration, you know what, but every Nigerian that supported him was subscribing, paying contribution, and that gives them ownership for the system. In America, that was taking example. You know the system, you know how they sponsor their own candidates. Every party member and those who believe in the program or the person they are sponsoring, they will subscribe. I think there's nothing bad in stipulating this program. Yeah. But how will the money should work?
Yeah. One of the things that take a lot of money are the logistics like adverts, airtime, radio. So perhaps there might be a way where the at least the not the private but the government stations will now have to allocate time for every candidate for free, because that would take out a lot of the expenses and other things like that. That's what I mean by thinking outside the box. But if you want candidates to, they must advertise on TV, they must advertise on radio, and these things, there's jingles, these things will cost money. So we need to figure out a way to balance it.
The amendment to the Electoral Act further seeks to address the following: the need for a better and improved local government elections, failure of card readers and time expiration for its use during election process, merger of political parties, vetting of sponsored funds, and inclusion of Nigerians in diaspora in the voting process. Going further, the Committee on Electoral Matters, jointly working with her Senate counterpart, hosted stakeholders' engagements time to time. In December 2020, stakeholders gathered to further discuss the fundamental and structural changes across the electoral processes from nomination to inauguration.
We remain committed to all the issues we have considered important in our legislative agenda, and without anybody holding us responsible, we have achieved most of those things that we have set as targets. And continue to advise us, engage with us, partner with us, and we will achieve those things that we have set for ourselves.
I expect also that we will discuss the weakness in party administration and in the nomination process that have often served to distort the electoral process. We should also together to seek permanent solution to the worrisome and increasing disruption of election using violence by politicians and their supporters.
We believe that there is no doubt that this bill, if passed into law, will further improve the electoral legal framework and deepen democracy in Nigeria.
Some other issues that have been advocated for through the constitutional amendment include an amendment to deal with electoral offenses with the jurisdiction vested with the Federal High Court instead of a commission, proposal for the reduction of the cost of election in Nigeria, and how the amendment will be of great benefit to the nation's democracy, as well as the use of electoral devices to guarantee free, fair, and credible elections. Other concerns raised for review in the electoral reform process include women's political representation, diaspora voting, and abolition of state independent electoral commission, amongst others. Eventually, 2 days were dedicated on the 15th and 16th of July 2021 to consider the Electoral Act of 2021 in the Committee of the Whole House. Much clamor called for a clause in the Electoral Act seeking approval for e-voting at an election and transmission of results on the introduction of electronic voting failed to pass amendment.
My amendment is to the effect that transmission of results under this bill, under the election, shall be by electronic transmission. I so move.
In favor of the amendment, say aye. Against, say nay. The ayes have it.
However, other clauses in the Electoral Act which were amended and reviewed were successfully passed, and they include the adoption of direct primaries as mandatory instead of indirect primaries, which deletes the provision in the bill on the use of delegates. This is to reduce election costs. Deletion of provisions for symbols of political parties, as there is already a process for updating parties' existing logo. And deletion of civic education by the Commission, as it is a direct repetition of the Commission's mandate. Done with the Electoral Act Amendment of 2021, with its passage in the Senate and House, the legislature continues to nevertheless receive more bills calling for more reforms in the electoral process. Some of the bills are titled, the Bill for an Act to alter Section 76, 116, 132, 178, and 285 of the 1999 Constitution as amended to provide for the expansion of the time for elections to the National Assembly, State Houses of Assembly, the Office of the President, and Office of the Governor. Amendment of the time for the determination of pre-election matters so as to provide sufficient time for the conduct of party primaries and final determination of pre-election matters by the courts prior to election day. And the Election Criminal Tribunal Bill 2021. To the reforms in the education sector, the Ninth House through its standing committees on education have been considering bills seeking the establishment or upgrade of tertiary institutions around the country, cutting across technical education, agricultural colleges, health and medical institutions, among other specialized institutions of study. Despite the challenges associated with the setting up of new institutions in the country, the legislative arm of government welcomes the idea. Some of these bills include establishment of the Federal Technical University, Asaba, Delta State, establishment of the Federal College of Education, Kiana, Nasarawa State, Admiralty University of Nigeria, Ibusa, Establishment Bill 2021, and establishment of the University of Agriculture and Technology, Okeogun, Oyo State.
As we work on this bill, we have a responsibility to ask ourselves to what extent the establishment status of existing institutions have limited their ability to innovate including by entering into partnerships that add real value in terms of research and development, governance improvements, among others such. A lot of our children desiring to acquire tertiary education don't get admission as a result of several factors, among which is allocation of certain number of slots for admission based on quota system, which of course cannot accommodate all candidates, even if the necessary requirements for admission are met. This challenge is partly due to inadequate tertiary institution in the country.
With the 171 universities we have in Nigeria, the admission every year does not exceed 500,000, and we have applicants sometime in excess of 1 million. So we are excited and we support this.
So we are pleading that the schedule of the list of the federal colleges of education should be one, in tandem with whereas all the laws should just be the same thing, with random variations, which one is conventional and which one is technical.
As a means towards solving the problem of inadequate manpower while building entrepreneurs, the lawmakers are also considering the bill for an act to provide for the compulsory teaching of vocational studies in the syllabuses of secondary schools in Nigeria and for related matters.
Every thriving economy world over, like the US, the China, India, their economy is anchored and sustained by small businesses and entrepreneurial spirit. One sure foundation for that to happen is to fully integrate the vocational training into the core educational system of our economy.
The committee has seen going around parts of the country on oversight. This bill, if properly implemented, may save us from the looming doom. Sir, UBEC is building in every state a school for basic education, or for vocational education. Most governors just abandon the buildings. There is one in my local government built 3 years ago, handed over to the state government, 14 buildings. It has not been utilized for anything.
May I ask you, can we compel a private school that came out to teach only grammar to do vocational courses? You can do that with government schools, sir. I may go to say that we should establish more vocational colleges.
Calls have been made by Nigerians during the constitution review process for a strengthened fundamental human rights of Nigerians to give right to education and funding of primary education as a first-line charge item by the federal government. Other legislative considerations by the Ninth House in the education sector include a modernized retirement age for teachers in Nigeria Bill 2021 and the amendment of Tertiary Education Trust Fund Act of 2011 to expressly provide that colleges of agriculture shall benefit from the fund and provide for additional conditions for accessing the fund for capital projects by beneficiary institutions to encourage the beneficiary institutions to embark on capital projects instead of relying solely on Fund for Capital Developments. The amendment of the TED Fund Act is to also provide for inclusion of academic staff of research institutions, research institutes and colleges of agriculture respectively as beneficiaries of research grants, scholarship and other intervention funding under the Tertiary Education Trust Fund and for related matters.
This is hoping we have educated you on what our representatives in the Ninth House are up to regarding their roles in ensuring Nigerians get the right set of laws to foster sectoral reforms. Thanks for sharing your time with us on the program. Let's meet again next time. Bye-bye.